There's a certain kind of death that doesn't make the news. No explosion, no disaster, no dramatic headline. Just a slow exhale. A diner that closes, a school that doesn't reopen, a generation that leaves and stops sending postcards. These aren't ghost towns and old westerns. These are places with zip codes, sports teams, and people who still remember when things were different. We're counting down 10 American cities that are quietly disappearing. Not with a bang, but with a for rent sign nobody answers. If data makes you feel something, hit like. If you want to see this before it's a documentary on Netflix, subscribe. Let's go. Number 10. Cleveland, Ohio. The mistake on the lake that never got an apology. Cleveland had 914,000 residents in 1950. Today, it's under 360,000. That's not urban decline. That's urban erasure happening in slow motion. The manufacturing jobs left in the 70s and 80s, and nothing ever fully replaced them. Median household income sits around $32,000, less than half the national average. The poverty rate is above 30%, making Cleveland one of the poorest large cities in America. Violent crime rate is consistently among the top 10 in the nation. Nearly 1 in 5 properties in Cleveland sits vacant. That's not blight. That's a city arguing with its own square footage. Cleveland has the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a world-class art museum, and a medical system that draws patients from across the globe. None of that fixes a school system so underfunded it made national headlines for crumbling ceilings and broken heating. One Reddit user put it plainly, Cleveland is the city that keeps getting back up and then getting punched again before it can catch its breath. That's not just a punchline, that's a pattern. And the people still living there today deserve far better than being someone else's cautionary tale. Number 9. Rockford, Illinois, is Chicago's forgotten shadow. Rockford sits 90 miles northwest of Chicago, like a city that got lost on the way to somewhere better. Population peaked around 150,000 in the 1980s and has been sliding ever since, now sitting near 148,000 and still dropping. Violent crime rate is among the highest in the nation for a city its size, roughly 3 times the national average. Median household income is around $59,000, well below the Illinois average of $78,000. Poverty rate sits near 20%. The manufacturing collapse of the 80s gutted the local economy, and nothing ever moved into the vacancy it left behind. Downtown Rockford feels like someone pressed pause in 1994 and forgot to come back. One Reddit user said it without any softening. Rockford is what happens when a city gives up on itself and calls it tradition. Illinois doesn't exactly have a track record of fiscal genius, but Rockford didn't even get the interesting version of the collapse. It just got the quiet one, the kind where the last factory closes and everyone pretends they didn't hear it. And then the next generation leaves for Chicago, which is 90 minutes away, and never comes back for anything except holidays. Number 8. Baltimore, Maryland, the city that Netflix made famous for the wrong reasons. If you've seen The Wire, you think you know Baltimore. The real Baltimore would like you to know the show was cautiously optimistic. Since 2010, Baltimore has lost more than 27,000 residents. Population is now under 580,000, the lowest since the 1920s. Poverty rate hovers around 20%, well above the national average. Roughly 15,000 properties sit vacant, representing about 7 to 8% of the city's entire housing stock. That's the 3rd highest vacancy rate in the country. Baltimore has Johns Hopkins, a world-famous harbor, and some of the best crab in the eastern United States. None of that fixes a broke school system or a homicide rate that makes international headlines. One Reddit user said it best, Baltimore is a city that could be great and somehow keeps choosing not to be. That's not entirely fair. It's more that the people who could fix it keep deciding it's not their problem. Meanwhile, the people who actually live there keep paying the bill, keep showing up, and keep being told that help is coming. It's been coming for 50 years, and every year it doesn't arrive, more people quietly pack their bags, take one last look at the harbor, and drive south on I-95 without looking back. Number 7. Gary, Indiana, the city that Detroit looked at and said, "At least we're not that." Gary had 178,000 residents in 1960. Today it has fewer than 69,000. That's not population decline, that's population collapse. Once the steel capital of America, Gary felt invincible. Then the mills downsized. Then the jobs evaporated, then the people followed. Today, roughly one-third of all homes in Gary are unoccupied or abandoned, according to city redevelopment estimates. Median household income is around $37,000. The poverty rate sits above 33%. Violent crime rate is among the highest in the nation. Gary is Michael Jackson's birthplace. The city put up a museum, but even nostalgia tourism can't outrun structural collapse. One Reddit user said something that hit hard. Gary isn't a cautionary tale. It's the cautionary tale everybody already forgot. The American Rust Belt isn't just economic history. It's thousands of people who watched their city fold in slow motion and had nowhere to go. The steel is gone. The jobs are gone. The population is less than half of what it was. And the story barely makes the news anymore because we've all quietly decided it's normal. Number 6. Shreveport, Louisiana. When the oil money left, it took everything else with it. Shreveport sits in the northwest corner of Louisiana, like a city that got lost on the way to somewhere better. Population has dropped from 200,000 in 2010 to around 178,000 today. That's nearly 11% gone in a single decade. Violent crime rate is consistently top 5 in the nation. Median household income is around $42,000, while Louisiana's already below average state median sits at $57,000. Infrastructure is deteriorating faster than budgets can respond. The hospital system is strained. The school system is struggling. And the oil and gas economy that once made Shreveport feel permanent quietly moved on. One Reddit user described it as a city with a fancy suit and an empty wallet, always one bad season away from the edge. Louisiana is already losing people faster than a jazz festival loses its cover charge. Shreveport is where that story gets personal. The people who leave don't leave because they don't care. They leave because caring stopped being enough a long time ago, and the city never quite noticed they were gone until the tax base started following them. Number 5. Flint, Michigan. The city that already made the documentary. Yes, Flint is on this list. No, the water crisis is not resolved. Not really. Flint's population peaked around 163,000 in 1960. Today it sits near 80,000. That's more than half the city gone over 60 years. Lead contamination headlines started in 2014. A decade later, infrastructure replacement remains incomplete. In October 2023, the Attorney General's office dropped all criminal prosecutions against officials involved. Nobody went to prison. Median household income is around $36,000. The poverty rate is above 34%. The violent crime rate is among the highest in America. Flint is what happens when every system that's supposed to protect people fails simultaneously and then spends the next decade arguing about whose fault it is. One Reddit user captured it without irony. Flint didn't just lose people, it lost the belief that things could get better. That's the quietest kind of dying. When hope leaves before the people do. And when the people that irresponsible face no legal consequences whatsoever, hope doesn't just quietly leave. It packs everything it owns, moves to another state entirely, and registers to vote there out of spite. Number 4. St. Louis, Missouri. A tale of two cities where both halves lost. St. Louis is the kind of city that gets cited in statistics about everything going wrong simultaneously. Population peaked at 856,000 in 1950. The city proper today sits around 282,000. That's a two-thirds collapse over 70 years. St. Louis consistently ranks among the top 5 most dangerous cities in America. The poverty rate is above 21%. Vacancy rates in some neighborhoods exceed 30%. The metropolitan area is doing better. The city itself is hollowing out. What makes St. Louis uniquely painful is that it has the bones of something exceptional. The Gateway Arch, world-class museums that are actually free, a food scene that punches above its weight, jazz history embedded in the pavement. None of it is enough to reverse the math. One Reddit user captured it precisely. St. Louis is what happens when a great city becomes a great region and forgets to take everyone with it. The people who could leave did. The people who stayed are the story nobody puts on a tourist brochure. And the gap between the skyline and the reality underneath it gets wider every year without anyone seeming to notice. Number 3. Youngstown, Ohio. The city that became a case study before it became a punchline. Youngstown's story gets taught in urban planning courses, which sounds like an honor until you realize it's because the city failed so completely it became useful as a warning. Population in 1930 was 170,000. Today, it's under 60,000. That's not shrinkage, that's erasure. Steel industry collapse in the late 70s and 80s gutted the economy permanently. Median household income sits around 34,700. Poverty rate is 36%, more than double the Ohio average. Violent crime rate is one of the highest in the state. Youngstown tried something radical. It developed an official shrinkage plan, accepting the CIT. I would never return to its former size and restructuring around that reality. One Reddit user called it the most honest thing a city has ever done. Youngstown stopped lying to itself. The rest of the Rust Belt is still writing the denial chapter. The tragedy isn't that Youngstown shrank. It's that it had to become a textbook before anyone took it seriously. And that the textbook mostly gets read by planners in other cities who are quietly watching themselves move in the same direction. Number 2. Memphis, Tennessee. The city that has everything and keeps losing anyway. Memphis is genuinely confusing. It has cultural wealth most cities would spend decades trying to manufacture. Birthplace of the blues, home of Graceland, one of the most distinct food identities in America. It sits on the Mississippi River with a port that processes billions in goods annually. And yet Memphis has been losing ground for years. Population has dropped from around 650,000 in 2000 to roughly 611,000 today, and the slide continues. Memphis had the highest number of homicides in its recorded history in 2023, with 397 killings. The Department of Justice investigation that year confirmed Memphis had the highest rate of aggravated assaults among large American cities. Child poverty rate is above 40%. Median household income is around $43,000. Memphis is like inheriting an incredible house and discovering the foundation is cracked. You keep showing people the architecture. Nobody talks about the basement. One Reddit user said it plainly. Memphis has more soul than any city in America and less infrastructure to support it than almost anywhere else. That gap between cultural richness and civic failure is where cities quietly disappear. And Memphis has been standing in that gap for a very long time. Number 1. Detroit, Michigan. The city that America built, used, and then forgot to turn off the lights. Detroit doesn't need an introduction. It needs an honest one. Peak population in 1950 was 1.85 million. Today, it's around 637,000. That's not a city shrinking. That's a city being returned to nature one block at a time. Detroit filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in United States history in 2013. Roughly 78,000 properties sat vacant at its lowest point. Median household income is around $39,500. Poverty rate is above 31%, giving Detroit the highest poverty rate among large American cities in 2023. Violent crime rate is among the highest in the country. And yet, Detroit is also one of the most compelling urban revival stories in America right now. Property is cheap enough that artists, entrepreneurs, and community organizations have been rebuilding from the inside out. Urban farms grow where factories once stood. Neighborhoods are returning, slowly. Imperfectly, stubbornly. One Reddit user wrote something that stopped the scroll. Detroit isn't dying, it's deciding what it wants to be next. That might be the most American sentence ever written about the most American city ever built. Built on ambition, broken by abandonment, trying again anyway. America's dying cities aren't failures of geography, they're failures of attention. The federal money went elsewhere. The corporate headquarters relocated. The young people left for coasts that didn't want them either. But in every city on this list, people stayed. People are still there right now, raising kids, running small businesses, burying neighbors, and showing up. The quiet death of a city is never quiet to the people living inside it. Like this if that landed somewhere real. Subscribe, because the stories actually worth telling are always the ones nobody is packaging yet, and this channel finds them before the algorithm does.